Hello, and welcome to this Youth Issues program. As young people, we face many challenges, and our goal is to talk through these challenges and to provide solutions for them. For the next few minutes, we will be talking about belonging. Now, belonging is one of those subjects that touches on many areas, but essentially we'll be discussing this idea that we're losing a sense of belonging. Our society is shifting so much that sometimes we lose our place and we don't know exactly where we fit. My name is Anna, and joining me in this conversation is my friend Paul. Hello, Paul. Welcome.
Hi, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me.
Pleasure.
Paul has been working with young people for a long time, so he's got a lot of stories to share with us today. So let's just begin. I want to ask you, what is belonging?
Well, I suppose belonging is the ability to connect. But it's more than just connecting. It's having a deep sense that you fit somewhere. And you fit, and you, to use the same word, you belong there.
And do you agree with this debate that we are losing a sense of belonging?
Yes, I do. I think it's happened over a number of years, probably through the last century or so, as how society has changed. If I give you the example of probably your grandparents and further generations used to live out in villages, small towns. They worked in farms or cottage industries. But gradually what has happened, society has moved, and your generation and my generation before yours moved to cities. It's called urban drift. You move to get education, we move to get work. And in so doing, we've left behind some of the old structures, the family structure. We've left behind the local village community. And in so doing, we've gained some things, but we've lost a sense of belonging. And that's a challenge.
I can definitely relate to that. I've moved around a lot in my life, and we're far away from my extended family now, and I do miss that sometimes.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I can give you the example of my daughter. She got to age 18 and went to university. Now, we live on the outskirts of a big city, and she went into the city to study. And in so doing, she took university digs. And she was excited. It was going to be a new day for her. And I remember driving her up there to the university and getting her settled. And then there's the time where you say goodbye and she's on her own. Now, she would come back at weekends or different times. But I gradually realised something, that over the year, the excitement began to wear off. She had some friends, she had people that were sharing the accommodation, but gradually she became lonely. And it's very interesting, the next year she decided to stay at home and commute, which took her longer, cost her a little more in travelling, but for her, it was worth it because she belonged back, not just with her family. I'd like to think it was just her dad and mum she wanted to be with, but she had her friends where she lived, and that was her sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm. Her community where she lived.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was more important than the excitement of moving away to the big city at the time.
Well, you mentioned family, and there's a lot of people who grow up in dysfunctional families. Maybe their parents got divorced or they're raised by single parents. How do these young people, first of all, what are their struggles, and how can they get a sense of belonging even in their family?
Yeah, again, life has changed. Once you lived out back in your village or town, I'm not saying everything was perfect, but you had some things going for you. And the first things you had going for you, you had an extended family. Now, I don't know what it was like in your family, but in families there used to be not just the children, but there were the parents and there were the grandparents, and there may have been aunts and uncles nearby and cousins and so forth. Now, maybe it's a bit like the Waltons, a bit too idealistic, but that's what happened. And so you had this big family structure, and you fitted in, all right, because you belonged, and you had other people that were part of knew where you belonged in life. But gradually as you move, that's changed, and you've got your own family, but I doubt if you probably live with your grandparents to this day. It doesn't happen so much now. And aunts and uncles, no, they're away. So that's happened, and then you're right, society's changed, and now there was all many sort of family structures. And there is a penalty to be paid in a way. There's a challenge, and it makes people lonely because they lose their self-esteem. So much is built in that family structure.
Yes, and sometimes people don't feel accepted in the family that they're in. And so they turn to other people where they may get a sense of belonging.
Number of things happen there, because gradually as you develop in life, it's going to happen. Just as you grow, you also develop mentally and socially. And there's this great challenge to want to be independent. Now, I don't know if you can remember it in your own life. I think I can in mine, and I can see it in my kids, certainly. And they just want to be independent. And that means actually pushing away for a time. And that's fine, but you're pushing away from the anchors. And in so doing, where are the new anchors? And that's hard when you're 14, 15, 16 to actually negotiate that pathway.
And how important is it to find good anchors, good alternative anchors?
Yeah, very important. I believe it comes in the form of people. I guess if I look back in my life, I can look back to somebody who, when I was about 16, 17, 18, became, we would call them a role model, a mentor or whatever, but somebody who became very important in my life, and somebody who helped mould me through the time where my parents, probably I'd kept them at arm's length. And yeah, we all need somebody. And of course, you've got to choose wisely, and you don't always, but finding the right people to help you walk that path. I was lucky, I think I did.
There's a lot of young people who, for example, might join a gang because that's where they feel accepted and they're taken under somebody's wing.
Yes.
But of course, down the path, that becomes destructible.
Yes. It's the sense of wanting to belong, and you belong to a tribe, you belong to a gang, you belong somewhere. You can see it in football, actually. You belong to your club, you belong to your team. You don't change your team, whatever happens, you stay with your team. Other things can change, but boy, you don't change your team. Yeah.
You mentioned self-esteem earlier. How important is self-esteem in finding the sense of belonging?
Yes, I think self-esteem certainly is very important. It's a sense of you're comfortable in your own skin and who you are. The trouble with many of us, we look for externals for self-esteem. It could be possessions, it could be materialism, it could be belonging to your tribe or team or whatever. And if your self-esteem is only built in something else, if that's taken away, then you're in trouble. For instance, there's always going to be somebody who's better looking than you are. And if your self-esteem's only in your looks, as we get older and we lose our hair, then we're in trouble. If it's only in our possessions or our job, then we have a problem, because if you lose your job, where's your self-esteem? So self-esteem is being comfortable within myself and knowing I am valuable, I'm needed by somebody, I belong to somebody, and I have an inherent worth. And that feeling of inherent worth helps give you self-esteem, because you know who you are and what you are.
So practically, how can you increase your self-esteem?
It probably builds up within you, and I think it is actually one of the jobs of parenting, is actually to help share that self-esteem. It's not just about giving kids the newest toy. It's about helping them understand that they are important. I think you gain self-esteem also by actually not just being involved and looking inward, by actually looking outward. And you can gain self-esteem because you are valuable to somebody else and finding ways of actually interacting with other people and helping other people too. It's not so easy to pin down, but you know, self-esteem helps us overcome a huge amount of hurdles.
Do you think having a spiritual life helps to increase self-esteem?
Yes, I actually do. In fact, I think it helps you very much indeed. We can say it is faith, having a spirituality, if you like. And it's certainly, you've got that feeling that, well, there is God there. And if all else may fail, God is there with you. There are many different instances where people have hung on through the very difficult times of life, and they know there is something there and somebody there for them.
Do you think it's possible to feel alone even if you do live in a big family, or if you live in university and you're surrounded by students?
Yeah, you can be lonely in a crowd. I saw this. We were running a big youth event and we were planning this event in another country. And there was a man who'd come to be part of the team. He was actually quite high up in an organisation. And at the end of the day, after we'd done a lot of hard work, the most natural thing all of us wanted to do was go and ring home. Now, it was before the internet in these days, so we were actually ringing home, but there were mobiles. And we had to go and find a connection. And where we were, there was only one spot somewhere around the site where you could actually get your signal. And so we all went off going to get the signal to ring home. And this guy afterwards, he looked at me and he said, you know what? He said, I've got nobody to ring. Oh. And it suddenly struck me, that's loneliness. There was something happening in his life at the time. He actually, I think, was going through a divorce. But he actually said to me, look, my kids have grown, they're out there doing different things. They don't need me at this time. And I've got nobody actually to ring. That's hard.
Yes, it is. And I think a lot of young people go through that as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can, if there's nobody there for you, what can you do to increase your sense of belonging if you have kind of nowhere to belong?
Well, there's always somebody there for you. Deep down, most of us will have some friends at some level somewhere. Now, some are closer friends than actually others. The trouble is we've let that drift as well. We've let relationships drift. Build relationships. Spend time. The more you spend time with other people, the more they will spend time with you as well.
So where do you think social media kind of fits into all of this?
Yeah, social media has its place. For today's generation, it's what they're completely used to. It's great. It does so much. But there are the challenges, because you can be lonely amongst social media, even with hundreds, or should I say thousands of friends on your social media site. Yeah. At the end of the day, they're just a line or a sentence. Belonging actually is deeper than that, isn't it? It's being involved. It's having a knowledge that somebody cares and somebody's there. That comes back to the spiritual side, actually. You know somebody's there and somebody cares. And that helps build the self-esteem.
I like what you're saying, but a lot of people, a lot of young people now are born into this social media society, and that's all they know. And to them, it is a sense of belonging.
Yes.
So what do you think about that?
That's okay. But I would say to you, it's probably only surface deep. Mm-hmm. And why not? Use social media. You can't go back. Society as it is. And it's very important. And yes, young people interact through social media all the time. But when the computer's switched off, or when at the end of the day that there is downtime or whatever, there is still that need to speak to somebody physically, to look somebody in the eye, to feel the warmth, to know there's a touch. That's important.
A lot of young people, though, they just spend all day on their devices. They're glued to them.
Get out there. There's a world to be discovered. And in actual fact, if I can come back to the thought of doing something for other people, you can Google this, but Google random acts of kindness. And you will find a huge amount of things out there of what people just try and do to brighten up somebody else's life. Giving flowers, giving a smile, helping somebody with their shopping, numerous things. Get involved in a charity. There's many charities out there, both at home and abroad. Get involved in doing something, giving something to somebody else. And funnily enough, you actually gain yourself as well. But it needs that decision. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to do something.
So you need to take initiative.
Yeah, take initiative, make a choice, get out there, be interested in other people. If you're interested in people, they will be interested in you.
You're saying that it's important to take initiative and to really be active in finding your sense of belonging.
Yes, I believe it is, and that's one thing that we can all actually do. But there are deeper levels, and I don't want to downplay that as well, because sometimes people can get medically lonely, they can get depressed, and that's something that is clinical and is serious and needs to be dealt with professionally as well. And on that level, people would love to be able to snap themselves out of it, but I don't think it's that easy always to do that.
Do you think that where we are in society now, where is our world going? Are we going towards an even worse place with an even lonelier future? Is it time to go back to our traditional ways of doing things?
It's almost like, is the glass half full or half empty? And it depends how you want to look at that. The world is going to advance. We're going to get more and more technological advances, and we wouldn't want to be without them. None of us would want to go back pre-computer days and just have the typewriter and nothing like that. None of us would go back to that. And yet, at the same time, it's probably, there is a human challenge that is happening at the same time. And yes, I believe we may need to look back to our roots to find our esteem in a highly technological world.
Do you think that's already kind of happening? I'm just thinking about people who play video games, and there's these video game communities where you literally have money and your house and everything, but it's all virtual.
Yeah, and that's done in many things as well. You can play chess online, you can do all sorts of different things with other people online. And so that's a way of doing it, and why not? But still deep down for some people there's that worry that they're going to come home at night, they're going to come home from their job or their college or their university, they're going to close the door, and apart from the computer, they're not going to speak to anybody else until next morning. And that affects both, I think, young and old alike as well.
You just mentioned young and old. Do you think there's a big gap between the young and old generations these days?
Yes, there is. And yet, deep down, we're all the same. We all crave the acceptance and the need for a human relationship. But there is a generation gap. It's been there for many years. But yeah, we perhaps lost this in society as it grew.
Do you think this generation gap is causing us to be more lonely?
Yes, in one sense, I think it probably is. Today's world is probably based around people being young, your age. As I am now getting older, today's society, older people are not valueless, but they are probably not as valuable as they once are. But let me put that one back to you. How do you see that?
I have to agree with you. At university, we studied ageism, and there is, like you said, value put on young people
Yes.
these days. And a lot of times old people are overlooked, or in care homes they're even abused.
Yes.
And I think it has to do with the technological advances that have happened so recently and so fast.
Yeah.
So our grandparents, they're still kind of in one era, and we're in another era. So sometimes we don't know how to bring them together.
We also see it in the media as well. You get people, and you read it about on the papers and so forth and the news, but presenters, and they get through their 20s, 30s, and they get to their 40s and beginning to get a little older, and suddenly there's a great need. It's either to the younger again by having cosmetic surgery of one
Yes.
shape or form, or you're finding that they're actually having their contracts terminated to find a newer, younger presenter. And that can be lonely too, can't it?
Yes.
Because what happens? You lose your self-esteem. You've lost your worth. Yeah, it's a lot going on, isn't there?
And I think what we forget is that we're all going to get old one day.
Yes.
So I think we should treat older people with more respect, because we will be there one day too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, go talk to some older people at some point. You will find a wealth of stories, of experience, of interest, and you will find there are things that actually are more up to date than you will ever realise. And boy, they want someone to talk to too.
So we, in this way, if a young person goes to visit an older person, the younger person who's feeling lonely has a companion, and so does the older person.
Yes, most certainly that's actually true. Yeah.
That's great. Is it possible to belong to more than one group or place?
Oh, it most certainly is. I think all of us do that. We come in and out of various different, not just relationships, but different aspects of our life. I don't know if you've ever seen the circus juggler. And he will have a pole and some plates, and he spins a plate on a pole, then he moves down the line, spins a plate on the second pole, spins a plate on the third pole, spins a plate on the fourth pole, then rushes back, and the first one's beginning to wobble. So he does it. Have you seen that happen?
I haven't seen it live, but yes,
okay.
I know the idea.
And we're all doing that. We're all busy spinning plates. And it's great. And when you're young, you spin more plates than most people. You've certainly got more contacts than you'll ever have at any other time in your life. And my guess is you're spinning your social plate, your study plate, your work plate. There may be a sports organisation plate. There might be a church plate. There's certainly the family plate. Whatever you're doing, you're spinning all these plates. Suddenly, at some point, one of the plates begins to wobble or fall. And it often happens with relationships. Unfortunately, we take relationships for granted.
Okay.
And it could be family, it could be husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, whatever. And we get to the stage sometimes where something else gets more important, and we take it for granted, and that plate begins to wobble and fall. So to answer your question, yes, we can have multiple belongings, but it sometimes comes to a crisis where something begins to wobble or fall. And the question is, what do you then do?
So what do you then do?
Yeah, it depends how important it is to you. You've either got to cut out one of the other levels, or you've got to spend more time spinning that plate. And yeah, we often, it's the family plate, the relationship plate. Now, I happen to be a Christian. It could be your relationship with God that you take for granted too, and let that fall. And then there are consequences when that happens, and those consequences can lead you to be actually lonely and can lead to depression at times too.
I want to ask you, from your childhood until today, through your adulthood, where do you belong?
I've never had a sense that I didn't belong. And I have to praise my family, I guess, for this, and give them, say thanks, well done, because I knew I belonged to a family. And I've always joined sports clubs. Now I'm getting older now, but I always joined sports clubs, or I joined other organisations, and I knew I belonged somewhere. So currently, where do I belong? My family. I'm very fortunate. I have a loving wife. I have 2 kids, grandchildren now, as I've got older. And I'm important to them, and they're important to me. So I belong. I've got some good friends. I've also got different organisations that I belong to, and personally I have my church. And that gives me the sense of, yeah, I belong.
Can I ask you, if a young person came to you and said, Paul, I'm struggling with my belonging, I don't know where I fit in, what are the top 3 pieces of advice that you would give them?
Well, I think the first advice is they've done the right thing by recognising that they have a problem. And I actually think God created us with a need to relate to other people. So I would say make a priority of what is important to you. And if relationships are important to you, spend time in building up those relationships with whoever it may be that's important. And thirdly, don't just look at yourself, but look outside. And that's why I related about finding others in need to do something for. So I think those were the 3 top issues that I would, or the top ideas I would give somebody.
Well, thank you very much for joining me, Paul, and sharing your thoughts about belonging. And thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or want to know more, or if you need a place to belong, then contact us at lifeconnect.info. And I leave you with this thought. Live healthy, grow wise, and enjoy your youth.